right, that was Taps. You guys all know that song. We all know that song, and it's a very sad and somber song. This is Memorial Day 2024. I wanted to make sure that I did a show today and that I came to you today to just to remember and to recall our nation's fallen heroes. And I've been reminded on occasion, a time or two, actually, time and time again, actually, through writings and different veterans that have said, listen, this is a day of sobriety. This is a day to remember those that have fallen. This isn't a Veterans Day. It isn't a day to celebrate our troops that are living. It isn't a day to celebrate our cops, law enforcement, so on, et cetera, even though we honor all of those people. And there will be Veterans Day, and there will be days in which we honor all of these great people. But today is a day to remember the fallen. And I got to tell you, I think this day, as I get older, and as I see what America is enduring with the left really trying to fundamentally change America and undermine our Constitution, I feel as though a day like Memorial Day has become even more important to me. And I think it's really important that we all hold on to these traditions and to remember the fallen. I'm going to play for you. This is a video, a montage, if you will, a former president, or the late President Ronald Reagan, who, in my mind, was the best orator that I've ever heard. And so I want to play some video of him that Gabe has gotten set up, and just talking about Memorial Day. And there's clips of different speeches. And then there were a couple of articles that I read on the Federalist. I wasn't even intending on talking about them, but I think both of them made some really good points that I just like to share with you, the listener, that I think are just really important on this Memorial Day. And then after this podcast, I'm actually going to hightail it. I found out that there's a Memorial Day event that occurs at a cemetery literally just miles from me, a cemetery I didn't even know existed. So right after this, I'm gonna run there. I'm gonna be a little late, but I'm gonna try to catch some of the festivities there and perhaps meet some of the veterans that I'm sure will be there, honoring their fellow soldiers that paid the ultimate sacrifice. But anyway, without any further ado, we're going to play this Ronald Reagan video. This is 6 minutes long. I'm going to ask you to bear with me. We're going to break it up just for copyright infringement. We have to be careful of that. I also want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by MyPillow.com, as well as Wealth Protection Report, which I'll get, our Wealth Protection Research. So first, let me start with Wealth Protection Research. The very heart of our democracy lies a principle that we all hold sacred, that is free speech. It's the cornerstone that supports every freedom that we cherish, allowing our ideas to flourish, debates to ignite, and progress to be made. Without it, our pursuit of liberty and our ability to challenge our ability to challenge and our capacity to innovate would be severely constrained. Yet in today's digital age, the very platform that should democratize information is being used to narrow the spectrum of ideas we're exposed to. Important discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are being systematically silenced or overshadowed in mainstream narratives, leaving many feeling voiceless in conversations that are crucial to our financial independence and our security. This is where Wealth Protection Research steps in. They're armed with a mission that's never been more critical. Wealth Protection Research is not a financial advisory firm. They are defenders of free speech. They're committed to giving a voice to the silenced. In an era where dialogues about retirement, investments, and economic freedoms are increasingly censored, Wealth Protection Research is focused on ensuring that diverse, controversial, and revolutionary ideas have a platform. Wealth Protection Research tirelessly seeks out the financial experts, the thought leaders, and the trailblazers who have been pushed to the margins by mainstream media and tech platforms like Facebook and Google. These are the voices that challenge prevailing narratives, offering fresh, often contrarian perspectives on protecting and growing your wealth, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election. By spotlighting these thinkers like Jim Rickards and Porter Stansberry, Wealth Protection Research is not just sharing financial advice, they are fostering a movement towards a more open, informed, and free society. Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report, and this free report highlights the three best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election. It contains ideas the mainstream media won't touch, and listeners can get it completely free. All you have to do is text the word IDEAS, IDEAS, to 76626. Again, text the word IDEAS to 76626. And if you do that today, you'll get a free gold investment kit from Wealth Protection Research that's sponsored by Augusta Precious Metals. All right, guys, I'm going to go right to this Ronald Reagan video, and I appreciate you guys enduring our ads. Listen, there's a lot of sponsors out there that are too big of cowards to support programs like this. And so when we get people like Wealth Protection Research that are willing to fill in the gap and stand up for patriots and stand up for freedom, we want to support them. So I make no apologies about reading ads. It's the only thing that keeps shows like this alive. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and hear some Ronald Reagan speak. Go ahead and grab your Kleenex now. This is going to be a somber show, but this is going to be a good show. This is going to be a show that's worth it. And I got to be honest with you. I am honored to do this show today in a weird way. I feel humbled and I feel honored to be able to do it. And to keep a Memorial Day going. And I really think that we need to teach Memorial Day to our children. That hit me so hard this morning, that our children need to grieve and they need to mourn. They need to mourn the fallen, because if they mourn the fallen, they'll learn to appreciate their own lives and appreciate their own freedom that those soldiers gave them. All right, let's go ahead and roll it, Gabe, por favor.
On Memorial Day, we pause to remember those members of our armed forces who have preserved our liberty and our freedom by making the supreme sacrifice. While we Americans traditionally celebrate this day with picnics and parades, and while we think of this day as the unofficial beginning of summer, we know it is also a time of somber but inspiring memories. Memories of so many courageous Americans who, while wearing our country's uniform, fought and died so that we could enjoy the blessings of this day, so that we could live in peace and freedom. Today we pay solemn tribute to our fallen countrymen. We know we can never give them as much as they gave us, but we also know that our generation and succeeding generations can, by keeping the flame of freedom burning brightly, ensure that they did not die in vain. As we observe this Memorial Day by remembering our fallen patriots, let us also remember that preserving the peace and preventing war mean keeping our armed forces as strong and ready as they are today. Let us honor the memory of those who gave their last full measure of devotion by rededicating ourselves to what they died for a strong America, for the cause of freedom. The willingness of some to give their lives so that others might live never fails to evoke in us a sense of wonder and mystery. One gets that feeling here on this hallowed ground. And I have known that same poignant feeling as I looked out across the rows of white crosses and stars of David in Europe, in the Philippines, and the military cemeteries here in our own land. Each one marks the resting place of an American hero. And in my lifetime, the heroes of World War I, the doughboys, the GIs of World War II, or Korea, or Vietnam. They span several generations of young Americans, all different and yet all alike, like the markers above their resting places, all alike in a truly meaningful way. Winston Churchill said of those he knew in World War II, they seemed to be the only young men who could laugh and fight at the same time. A great general in that war called them our secret weapon, just the best darn kids in the world. Each died for a cause he considered more important than his own life. Well, they didn't volunteer to die. They volunteered to defend values for which men have always been willing to die if need be, the values which make up what we call civilization. Not far from here is the statue of the 3 servicemen, the 3 fighting boys of Vietnam. It too has majesty and more. Perhaps you've seen it. 3 rough boys walking together, looking ahead with a steady gaze. There's something wounded about them, a kind of resigned toughness, but there's an unexpected tenderness too.
I just want to pause just a minute. We have to be careful of copyright infringement. So anyway, you're just listening to a montage of the late, great President Ronald Reagan giving different speeches or excerpts of different speeches on Memorial Day during the tenure of his presidency. We can go back to the video, Gabe.
At first, you don't really notice, but then you see it. The 3 are touching each other as if they're supporting each other, helping each other on. I know that many veterans of Vietnam will gather today, some of them perhaps by the wall, and they're still helping each other on. They were quite a group, the boys of Vietnam, boys who fought a terrible and vicious war without enough support from home, boys who were dodging bullets while we debated the efficacy of the battle. It was often our poor who fought in that war. It was the unpampered boys of the working class who picked up the rifles and went on the march. They learned not to rely on us. They learned to rely on each other. And they were special in another way. They chose to be faithful. They chose to reject the fashionable skepticism of their time. They chose to believe and answer the call of duty. And then there was this newspaper account that appeared after the ceremonies. I'd like to read it to you. Yesterday, crowds returned to the memorial. Among them was Herbie Pettit, a machinist and former Marine from New Orleans. Last night, he said, standing near the wall, I went out to dinner with some other ex-Marines. There was also a group of college students in the restaurant. We started talking to each other, and before we left, they stood up and cheered us. The whole week, Pettit said, his eyes red, it was worth it, just for that. It has been worth it. We Americans have learned to listen to each other and to trust each other again. We've learned that government owes the people an explanation and needs their support for its actions at home and abroad. And we have learned, and I pray this time for good, the most valuable lesson of all, the preciousness of human freedom. The debt we owe to those who have left home and family to serve this cause is beyond measure. But our greatest debt of all is to those who fell in battle. Their ranks are legion, the stories of their heroism countless. Many of them lie beneath the soil of distant lands, and many here at home. Their final bivouac may be a well-kept cemetery or an unknown unmarked field or lane or shore, but glory guards each one well. These heroes who fought with all the faith and valor that free men can muster. Oliver Wendell Holmes expressed a fitting thought when he said, "At the grave of a hero, we end not with sorrow at the inevitable loss, but with the contagion of his courage." I join all of you who proudly share that spirit in your own service to our nation as you pay tribute to these brave Americans. May we always walk in the light of their memory, the light of liberty which shines from age to age and still illumines the way forward. God bless you, and God bless America.
Man, I gotta tell you, I mean, there's nobody like Ronald Reagan. I'm sorry. As far as this was a guy, and listen, I understand policy-wise, we can argue. There's some people that were better, more conservative, even, but he was one of the great ones of our time, no doubt about it. And for me, this is 2020 hindsight. I didn't even care about politics, obviously, until I was older. I was too young to care about Ronald Reagan, except that my dad absolutely loved him, even though he never voted. My dad only voted for Barack Obama. All right, that was it. And he voted for him one time, and he chose not to vote for him again after he learned about Barack Obama's gay agenda, basically. So that was his only time that he voted in a national election, which I think is a sad commentary, but that's but he is a man of conviction, and that was his thing. But anyway, he loved Ronald Reagan, so it shocks me that he never voted for him. He loved listening to him speak, and I share that same love for Ronald Reagan speaking. I just think even on a somber day like Memorial Day, his ability to be able to communicate and share a message about our fallen heroes is both inspiring and somber at the same time. And really, that takes a skill to be able to pull that off, and he is able to do that. And so I just have a couple of takeaways. I'm going to share just a little bit through a couple of thoughts through these columns that I read this morning. And I didn't even intend to make these columns part of the show, to be frank with you, but both of them stirred me in different ways as I was thinking through my own thoughts. And then I'm thankful for Gabe. Today I literally texted him this morning, and I should have texted him yesterday. I know. And Kim gave us some ideas for the beginning of the show. So thank you, Kim. I think last year I promised that I would never skip a Memorial Day. I don't feel like we deserve to do that, given the fact that soldiers literally paid the ultimate sacrifice. The least that we could do is to honor them, and in a small way. This is my way of just honoring them and also keeping tradition alive. And I'm starting to realize just how important tradition is. It's taken me quite some time to understand. I mean, there's some small traditions, holidays and such, but even familial traditions. This tradition to me now, Memorial Day, I'm going to do a show as long as I'm in this business, or I'm going to visit a site. My brother Darrell is out in a place called Bushnell, Florida, where they have a big event for Memorial Day and honoring the fallen. And from what he tells me, I mean, just so many people gather there, so many veterans that come or go to that particular event. And he said, he and his family with his children, he takes his children, and they're older now, even they still go. They're all college age, I believe, at this point. I mean, just one has graduated, two or in, but they all go. He makes it an event. They all go. And they talk to veterans there, which I think is just the coolest thing. But I thought about Memorial Day in this sense, and these are my own thoughts and words. And again, I'm going to also touch on these columns and just some things that came up. But I thought today, and I put this out on X, basically, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't even remember how I worded it, if I'm being completely honest. But in many countries around the world, soldiers die for their leaders. They die for despots. They die for power. But when you think about the American soldier, he dies for freedom. He dies for liberty. He dies for causes that are bigger than himself or herself. In some cases, they die for you. They die for me. There's no doubt that they die for the person next to them as well in that battle. But much of the world still today is barbaric. That isn't the case for the United States. So our soldiers, when they die for a cause that's so much better. I was thinking of some of the cliches. Freedom isn't free. And one reason why I wanted to do this show today, just thinking of that cliche, freedom isn't free. People have gone before us and they died. They've shed their blood. They've made the ultimate sacrifice. And so, yeah, I do think that it's okay to go out and barbecue and do all that kind of stuff. But I don't think we should do that without remembering the sacrifice that they gave up. And I'll share a line that Ronald Reagan, that wasn't in, I don't believe was in one of those clips unless I missed it, but I read it later in one of these Federalist columns, and I just thought it was so perfect, and I'll share that shortly. But freedom isn't free. These guys pay the ultimate sacrifice. They pay a huge price, and we can all talk about the history of America. Well, the whole world has a sordid history, but there's a reason that the United States became the greatest place on earth for anybody to live. And this is why we have an open border crisis, besides the fact that Joe Biden is keeping the borders open. But there's a reason why people want to come to the United States, because regardless of what you may think about it, all you social justice warriors, it's still the best place in the world to be, bar none. There's not even a place that's close. And then there's another cliche, home of the free because of the brave. And basically, listen, it's the same thing essentially. But we're able to be free because people paid the ultimate sacrifice so that we could live a free life, so that we can chase opportunity, so that we can chase our dreams, and so that we could worship God freely. And we know the left is trying to destroy all of that, which is even which is why I think Memorial Day is even more important, at least to me now, and that we remember this stuff and that it's held as a tradition and that we remember why the men died. Because if we remember why they died, then I think we'll remember why being an American citizen is so important. I think we have a duty as an American citizen to make sure that we leave this country a freer and more prosperous place than a generation before us. We haven't done a good job of that, but we can start. You know, I was reading through one of the columns. I forget which one, but there's two that I want to make sure I mention from the Federalist, because these gentlemen both did a good job. One gentleman being a family member of many that served in the military and are buried at he mentioned several national cemeteries that some of his family members are buried at, if I'm not mistaken. And another gentleman, you have J. Antonio Juarez, and then John A. Lucas. This gentleman actually served, I believe, infantry or some sort, or one but anyway, they both have ties to the military. Let's put it that way. And one is titled "The Unknown Soldier's Name May Be Forgotten, but His Sacrifice Should Not." The other column is "This Memorial Day, Remember the Fallen," like this farm boy from North Carolina. And I'll just breeze through those shortly. It's not going to take me long, but I look at all the soldiers that have that chose to serve, either through, volunteering, some earlier, may have been through a draft. Some people may have joined the military or the armed forces simply because they wanted a stable job and paycheck. They wanted 3 meals a day, but I got to tell you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't cheapen the sacrifice that any of these people made for them. So our job as American citizens is to make sure that our soldiers didn't die in vain. That's it. Our job as American citizens is to make sure that our soldiers didn't die in vain. We can't just give up on this great experiment that is known as America when these guys fought and died for it. The causes that they fought for and died for, the values. I'm just reading through some of my notes. Liberty, we take that so lightly. We can't take it lightly. The values, the traditions of America, our Bill of Rights, our Constitution, the rule of law. That's what gets me so frustrated, regardless of how you feel about Trump or what they're doing to him using this court system. That isn't American. That is anti-American, using the court system in order to try to defeat your political opponent. That is anti-American. Also, they died for their fellow soldier. They died for you and me. I've shared that. But here's the thing that Ronald Reagan said that I mentioned earlier, and it was mentioned in one of these one of the columns. It was in the column by John Lucas, "This Memorial Day, Remember the Fallen," like this farm boy from North Carolina. I'll share that story with you quickly. But think about this. This is such a perfect way to put it. And Ronald Reagan obviously did it. All right. So he said when it comes to our fallen heroes, they sacrificed 2 lives. One, the one they were living. All right. So that's one life. And then the one they had yet to live, and many people, I was reading this story. Which one is this? I'm sorry. I read 2 columns and I didn't highlight them, so I'm getting them a little confused. I'm just being, here it is. I'm being just completely open with you. But this is the one by John Lucas. "This Memorial Day, Remember the Fallen," like this farm boy from North Carolina. He reminds us that Memorial Day isn't is a day to remember and honor our soldiers, our sailors, our airmen, our Marines. He's a little offended. Offended when people say, Happy Memorial Day, but he says he never says anything because he understands what they're trying to say. But he asks us to set aside 30 minutes to visit the Wall of Faces or something like that, where that includes photos, memorials of all those that were killed in Vietnam. He says, pick a date, perhaps your birthday, wedding anniversary, college graduation. Look at the men who died on that date throughout the years of the Vietnam War. He said, see their photos, read the comments by family, friends, comrades, then reflect on the things they forfeited. Almost all of them would now be in their late 70s. They missed out on 50 to 60 years worth of joy and laughter, sorrow and tears, everything that makes up a life. So that's the second life, the life that they would have lived, essentially, that Ronald Reagan talked about. And that is what these soldiers gave up. They're having kids, going to college in many cases, having their grandkids, being able to share those stories. He talks about this young soldier, Garney Burleson. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Burleson. He was a farm boy from North Carolina, not a famous boy. Said you won't read about him anywhere. He was a member of the elite arrow rifle platoon of B Troop 19 Cavalry of the famed 1st Cavalry Division, also known as the Bravo Blues, for those of you that were familiar. And I'll be honest with you, I'm just being transparent, I wasn't. And that's why I really appreciate stories like this. And this young man was killed at the age of 20, January 28th, 1971, in Binh Tai Province, Vietnam. He's buried in a cemetery of a small country church outside of Asheville, North Carolina. No immediate family members are left to remember him today. His parents are gone, no siblings. He never had any children because he didn't get to live that second life, if you will. So at the time of his death, he had been in Vietnam for about 3 months before he lost his first platoon leader. He was under his second platoon leader after just 3 months. His first one was evacuated medically. He talked about how on one occasion this young man, Garney Burleson, was shot at by a North Vietnamese. And basically what happened is that North Vietnamese hit his rifle. The bullet went all the way down his rifle, knocking out his sight. Needless to say, if he had been looking through the scope, the bullet would have entered his head. But that never happened. They say that Garney's last platoon leader, known as Blue, for his radio call sign, was just feet away from Garney when he was actually killed in the line of battle. And Blue carried Garney's body to an evacuation helicopter that was able to come down into an opening in some trees or whatever. And then on Memorial Day of 2018, he went to go visit his gravesite. This is what I want to tell you. See, we think of Arlington National Cemetery. We think of Gettysburg. This other gentleman, Antonio Juarez, talked about, I said several, but I think it's just one national cemetery that his family, if I'm not mistaken, is buried in. Let me try to find that and pull it up. I want to make sure that I'm accurate with this. But he talked about prominent Arlington or Gettysburg in the U.S. His family members are buried, and his father and 5 uncles, wow, that served, are buried at Fort Snelling National Cemetery. And so he talks about that. But what we don't talk about is where this event is being held today, that I'm going to rush out to shortly to hopefully I get to catch some of it, and I think I will. I happened to make a wrong turn. I went into this small town, Central Florida area outskirts of Orlando, and I made a wrong turn and down this dirt road. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, there's a cemetery here. I've literally traveled that road so many times, countless times. It is unbelievable. Never knew there was a cemetery like literally right off of the main road. And then a buddy of mine told me, hey, listen, they have a Memorial Day event here every year. They do. I'm not sure if it's a 21 gun salute. I'm not sure exactly what. Forgive me, military people, but they do a gun salute. Veterans come. They mark the graves of the veterans, clean them up, make sure there's flags. This gentleman talked about this young man that was killed at the tender age of 20 in Vietnam, and his body is buried at a church in Asheville, North Carolina. And the church, sadly, had done a horrible job of making sure that his grave stays clean, there was no flag out there, or there was no notice of the fact that this guy was a military hero, if you will, that died made the ultimate sacrifice for us. And I got to be honest with you, I don't want to generalize the church, but I do feel like there's a serious indictment that needs to be laid at the foot of the church. We don't want to get involved in politics, but the reason why you're free and able to preach the gospel in the United States of America, at least for now, is because of the soldiers that died for you as well. And I think it is incumbent upon the church to recognize them and make sure that we remember them. And for God's sakes, if you have a war hero buried in your cemetery, make sure you honor that person. Make sure you remember that person. Make sure you clean up their grave. Make mention to your congregation. Set a flag there, for God's sakes. Let's just do the basics. I mean, if you have a cemetery at your church, it just seems like that makes sense to me. That just drives me nuts. But anyway, this young man lost his life, and there's so many countless others that are buried in cemeteries we don't know. That's the essence of the tomb of the unknown soldier. We don't know. There's soldiers that died in battles that we don't even know the names of. There was a battle that I heard of just today after reading this article from the Federalist by Antonio Juarez. The Battle of New Ulm was one war. I never heard of stuff like this. He talked about how during COVID, in his article, how during COVID he was blessed to live in an area in Minnesota where the restrictions weren't as bad. He would take his kids out for bike rides. Sometimes he would go by himself. And what he would do, since things were locked down, is he would ride these bike trails and different trails and so on, etc. And he said he would check out historic sites, which I think is really cool, right? Churches, monuments, and he said, but mostly cemeteries. And he would find these cemeteries off hikers' trails or hunters' trails that he didn't know existed. And they often would have. He mentions one particular cemetery where literally the entrance of the cemetery, they mentioned 2 war heroes that were laid to rest there. Now that's the way that it should be done. One was a gentleman by the name of Joseph Jack Frazier. He died was born in 1806, died in 1869. The other was Amabi Crispin, 1849 to 1867. So this was a young kid, only 18 years old. But Frazier, the first guy, 1806 to 1869, was the son of a British fur trader and a Dakota woman who was a farmer and trapper before becoming a scout and interpreter for the U.S. Army. He fought at the Battle of New Ulm, which was part of the Dakota Wars in Minnesota in 1862. Didn't know about him. I'm just being honest with you. I'm learning. Amabi Crispin was a member of the 2nd Minnesota Cavalry Regiment during the Dakota Wars and was part of a detachment that made it as far as North Dakota, where he fought at the Battle of Killdeer Mountain on July 28, 1864. Never heard of it. I'm just being... This is the unknown soldier. A man that happens to be riding his bike, stumbles across an old cemetery where they had paid homage to these soldiers to let people know they were buried there. He finds it off on a hunter's trail. There's pictures of it online if you check out the Federalist. But not every battle or soldier is known. Not every soldier is in Arlington. Not every soldier is in the Philippines, and not every soldier is in Snelling and other places, Normandy, you know what I mean, that are pretty famous. And that's not to denigrate, obviously, or minimize those that are. I mean, it's not what I'm trying to do at all. But just so that you understand, man, so many people paid the ultimate sacrifice, and it is just so incumbent upon us to remember them. And to remember their sacrifice. And again, a lot of these people, you don't think about this, but these were the boys of the working class. Ronald Reagan mentioned that too. And that's something that the left is absolutely destroying. Not only are they destroying the middle class, and I don't want to make this overly political, that wasn't my aim today, but not only are they destroying the middle class, where most of our military men come from, but you have China, because of our open borders, sending in fentanyl, killing many people, young men in the middle class. The boys of the working class are often the boys that go to war. And then they're trying to indoctrinate them so that they don't love America. But you know what could help? Memorial Day. I am so convinced of that now. This is a very interesting story. I'll just share this briefly and we'll close it out. My niece, or one of my nieces, is getting married her fiance happened to have a family member that literally was shot down. He was a pilot, a fighter pilot, apparently, and he was shot down, and his body was just recently found. This is absolutely insane. Man, I had the article pulled up. I looked it up. It was almost, it's such a cool story. But it's almost hard to believe. And now I hope I did not erase that column, and I may have. Oh my goodness. I think I did. Okay. Anyway, I believe the guy's name was like Carl Nisbet or something to that effect. But anyway, he was flying a mission over Germany, and he was shot down. And just recently, they thought that maybe he was buried in some cemetery. Like there were 10 crew members. 6 of them survived, 4 didn't. They thought that he was buried in some cemetery, maybe nearby, because that often happens. Sometimes they'll figure out years later that, oh, that was an American soldier, and there's apparently a government entity that takes care of that type of business. As a matter of fact, and there was a name of it, but since I accidentally deleted the story like an idiot, I can't tell you what the name of that organization is. But they ended up, I think, finding his body just recently, not too far from the wreckage, if I recall the story correctly. So it's been several days since I read that. But anyway, the unknown soldier. Just absolutely fascinating. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that I came on board and shared that with you today. I actually didn't even intend to be on this long today, but I just got off on a bit of a riff. But great columns at the Federalist by John A. Lucas this Memorial Day. Remember the fallen, like this farm boy from North Carolina. And the other column that was written by J. Antonio Juarez, the unknown soldier's name may be forgotten, but his sacrifice should not be. And let's just remember that this is a solemn day of remembrance for those that made the ultimate sacrifice. And it should be a day that not only that we remember those guys, that I think that we take time to thank God for them, right, and their ultimate sacrifice, because they are the reason that we continue to remain free, and we should never take their death in vain. We should fight for our own freedom. We don't have to fight in that way, thank God, at least not yet, hopefully never, but we do have to fight on the political battlefield. And so just remember those guys. It's okay to have fun, obviously, with your family, but I would encourage you parents that may be listening, you adults, don't help your kids understand the sacrifice. I really think that's the antidote to these social justice warriors that are trying to undermine our freedoms here. Help them to remember that there were people that died to give them the right to have the freedoms that they have. Gabe, I don't know if you got this together, but I think Gabe is going to close out the show, if I'm not mistaken, with a little bit of Billy Ray Cyrus. I'm not the biggest country country singer type person, but I do like some country music. I'm not going to lie to you. I like all types of music, and some country music is really good. But one of my favorites, at least when it comes to this particular Memorial Day, this day of remembrance, if you will, is Billy Ray Cyrus's Some Gave All, I believe is the name of the song. Before we go, I do want to remind you too, we do have one more sponsor. I want to just share with you real quick, MyPillow.com. Mike Lindell, he's been canceled everywhere, these shopping channels, mini box stores, but there's a deal, $25 extravaganza that's still going on. Go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio podcast square, enter my name, Carl, C-A-R-L, or give them a call, 800-858-0263, 800-858-0263, and take advantage of the $25 extravaganza deal that is going on, not just for Memorial Day, but until further notice, all right? All right, guys, until next time, don't grow weary doing good. Gabe is going to leave you with a little bit of Some Gave All.
Knew a man called him Sandy Kane. You folks even knew his name. but a hero, yes, was he. Left a boy, came back a man. Still many just don't understand about the reasons we are free. I can't forget the look in his eyes, or the tears he cried as he said these words to me. All gave some, some gave all. Some stood through for the red, white, and blue, and some had to fall. And if you ever think of me, think of all your liberties and recall some gave all. Now Sandy Kane is no longer here, but his words are oh so clear as they echo throughout our land. For all his friends who gave us all, who stood the ground and took the fall to help their fellow man. Love your country and live with pride, and don't forget those who died. America, can't you see? All gave some, and some gave all, and some stood through for the red, white, and blue, and some had to fall. And if you ever think of me, think of all your liberties and recall some gave all. And if you ever think of me, think of all your liberties and recall, yes, recall some gave all. Some gave all.